Hey everybody, just before we get into it today, there are going to be a lot of Italian pronunciations in this one. I'm doing my best. Our dear kind writer for this script has even spelled them out phonetically for me. I've also got my pronunciation dictionary right here. I am doing my best. So on this channel, we've covered the lives of a lot of Nazi officers and Nazi officials, and this is almost what we've forgotten about their Axis allies on the other side of the Alps, the Italian fascists. Their history may not be as well known as the lives of other protagonists of World War II, and yet I can assure you they had some interesting characters marching about in their black-shirted uniforms since Mussolini founded the Fascist Movement in 1919. One of them was today's protagonist, Roman aristocrat with a taste for action, a pioneer of naval special forces, a military leader loyal to Mussolini's regime, and the mastermind behind one of the most puzzling coups ever. The video today, well, that's the story of Junio Valerio Borghese, the Black Prince of Fascism. Before we start, let's clarify a couple of points. Point number one. At the time of the fascist regime and World War II, Italy was a monarchy, and Mussolini shared leadership of the country with King Victor Emmanuel III. But even if today's protagonist was styled as Prince, he was not the king's son. He was not even related to him in any way, and certainly had no claims to the throne. In certain countries such as Italy or Russia before the 1917 revolution, it could happen that certain high-ranking nobles were titled princes without having any royal lineage. Point number two, the nickname of Black Prince was only given to Borghese after the war because of the black shirt used as a basic uniform by members of the Fascist Party and the militia. During the war, he was actually known as the Frog Prince because his tactics relied heavily on the use of frogmen. But Frog Prince, it kind of sounds like the title of a Disney movie, and this guy was certainly no hero from a fairy tale. Plus, there's also the fact that Black Prince sounds a whole lot cooler. Alright, with that out of the way, let's crack on. Baby Junio was born in Artena, close to Rome, Italy, on probably the most unfortunate date ever, the 6th of June, 1906. Alright, so before you all go and get excited about a fascist prince of darkness being born literally on the day carrying the number of the beast, just consider that he came into an old aristocratic family, the Borgheses, who could boast Napoleon's brother-in-law and a pope among their ancestors. Moreover, he was baptized with probably the most unfortunate name ever, Junio Valerio Scipione Guisto Marcantonio Marea. His father, Prince Livio Borghese, was a diplomat, and therefore young Junio grew up and studied first in Great Britain and then Portugal and then finally back in Rome. As a second-born son, he knew he was not going to inherit either his family's wealth nor the small castle in Artena, so he had to find his own place in the world. Tradition dictated that non-firstborn sons in the aristocracy made their fortune either in the clergy or in the military. Junio chose the latter, enrolling in the Livorno Naval Academy. In 1928, he graduated with the rank of midshipman, with a specialization in submarine warfare and an underwater diving certificate under his belt. In 1931, he married Russian Countess Daria Wassilria Olsenfeif. The couple would go on to have 4 children, Elena, Paolo, Livio, and Andrea Shire. As a military man, he had grown very close to Mussolini's ideology and regime, especially with the fear and hatred of communism, which was actually one of the few traits shared by hardline fascists and the Italian aristocracy. But most of all, he was inspired by the extreme nationalism of the Duce's policies. These sought to establish an Italian sphere of influence from the Adriatic to the southern Mediterranean. A powerful navy was vital to that objective. When Italy's navy, the Regia Marina, entered World War II in June of 1940, it outnumbered the combined British and French fleets in the Mediterranean, 185 vessels to 144, although it suffered from a chronic lack of fuel. However, back in the 1930s, Italian shipyards were still lagging behind the British, both in quality and quantity of vessels. Young officers like Borghese proposed speed, stealth, and daring as an alternative. This meant investing in building small assault vessels manned by highly trained commandos. The chief example of this new tactical approach was the SLC, the Human Torpedo. The Human Torpedoes had been perfected by naval engineers Teseo Tassai and Elias Toski, who had nicknamed them the Maiali, or pigs, because of their strange grunting noise. Basically, these were miniature submarines on which two frogmen could sit astride. They were propelled by a small electric motor, and the frogmen at the front were in charge of steering. Their tactic was to infiltrate enemy ports at night, approach their target ship, and attach a magnetic mine to the hull. It sort of begs for a bit of an Instagram meme, doesn't it? Who would win, a battleship or two dudes on a banana boat? Surprisingly, though, it worked. They sank a total of 200,000 tons of Allied shipping in the Mediterranean theatre alone. This was so much of a problem that the British Royal Navy actually stole the idea, but we decided to call them chariots because pigs didn't sound classy enough. During the Spanish Civil War, Prince Borghese was able to build up experience in stealth submarine warfare. He led several illegal actions, bordering on piracy, intended to damage neutral navies supplying the legitimate Republican Spanish government. On the night of the 30th of August 1937, aboard the submarine Iride, Borghese went one step too far. He ordered a torpedo attack against what appeared to be a Republican ship. It wasn't. It was the British destroyer HMS Havelock. The torpedoes missed its mark, and Havelock gave chase, joined by 3 more destroyers and a light cruiser. Despite the first ever use of sonar in wartime and the deployment of depth charges, the sneaky prince evaded his pursuers and landed safely in Naples on September the 5th. But the ensuing scandal, it put an end to all submarine activities off the Spanish coast, meaning Borghese had to wait for at least 2 years before going back into action. On June the 10th, 1940, Mussolini declared war on France and the United Kingdom. On the 12th of June, the British light cruiser Calypso was sunk off the coast of Crete by an Italian submarine. And with that, the Battle of the Mediterranean had begun. Prince Borghese had progressed in the ranks and was now a corvette captain in charge of the submarine Shire. His unit was part of the 10th Light Flotilla, the special forces of the Italian Navy, known as the Decima MAS, where MAS stands for their motto in Latin, Memento Ordere Semper, remember to dare always. The Shire's modus operandi was to sneak as close as possible to enemy ports in the Mediterranean to launch 2 or 3 human torpedoes and sink Allied vessels. And this is how they scored a strategically significant victory, Borghese's greatest military success. On the 19th of December 1941, 3 of his pigs launched off the Shire and entered into the port of Alexandria, Egypt. They were undetected. The frogmen made contact with their targets, the battleships HMS Valiant and HMS Queen Elizabeth, and they placed their explosive charges. The British sailors captured and interrogated 2 of Borghese's men, but they would not reveal the nature of their mission until the last possible moment. They revealed the presence of the mines, allowing for most of the crew to disembark to safety. When the charges went off, Valiant, Queen Elizabeth, and 2 other ships sank in the shallow waters of Alexandria. Overnight, the Axis navies had gained strategic superiority, albeit temporarily, across the Mediterranean. Borghese went on to clock up more successes, with the Shire sinking or damaging a total of 90,131 tons of Allied shipping during the Battle of the Mediterranean. On the 1st of May 1943, Borghese was promoted to the rank of Ship of the Line Captain and Commander-in-Chief of the 10th MAS. Shortly afterwards, on the 25th of July, Benito Mussolini was deposed and arrested in a military coup backed by King Victor Emmanuel III. For a short period, the Italian army continued its fight alongside Germany. Until on the 8th of September, Mussolini's successor, Field Marshal Badoglio, announced completely unexpectedly that Italy had signed an armistice with the Allies. The country was split in 2 and found itself plunged into a civil war on top of the one that it was already fighting. The southern half was loyal to the king, and Badoglio, its armed forces, saw the Germans as the invaders, and as such they sided with the Allies. In the northern half, the Germans and die-hard fascists had installed Mussolini at the head of a newly founded Italian Social Republic. This saw the Allies as the invaders, and so it maintained its alliance with the Nazis. Prince Borghese decided to continue fighting on the German side, although he gave his men freedom of choice and awarded to everybody an unrestricted order of leave in case some of them wanted to join the king in the south. His behavior so far, it was quite honorable, although what followed may be open to a rather different interpretation. On the 14th of September, he signed an agreement with Nazi Germany, which effectively made him autonomous from Mussolini's newly founded republic. Yet it placed the 10th MAS in direct control of the German military. As a result, during the following 2 years, Borghese mainly assigned his men to land operations. More precisely, these were counterinsurgency operations at the behest of SS General Karl Wolff, intended to cripple cripple the anti-fascist resistance in northern Italy. During this period, the sailors, now foot soldiers of the 10th MAS, garnered a reputation as ruthless killers and torturers of guerrilla fighters and civilians alike. In the spring of 1945, when it was clear that the war with the Allies was lost, General Wolf met in Switzerland with a representative of the OSS, the CIA's predecessor, in order to negotiate a separate truce. One of Wolf's requests was for Borghese to receive honorable treatment. What this really meant was just to spare him reprisals from the resistance. The OSS kept their word. On the 25th of April 1945, the war in Italy was formally over, and Borghese, ever the sneaky prince, made it unscathed to Rome, disguised as an American officer. On the 30th of April 1945, the now democratic authorities in Italy apprehended Prince Borghese and charged him with being a collaborator of the Nazi occupation. After 3 years, he was finally trialed in February of 1949 and sentenced to 12 years in jail. Once again, the OSS, though, they came to the rescue. They lobbied the magistrates to reduce the sentence to 3 years, which he had already spent in jail waiting for the trial. So Prince Junio Valerio, etc., Borghese, he was now as free as a bird. At this point in history, the Americans were in need of the right people, and by that we mean right-wing people, to be active in Italy in balancing their perceived threat of a communist takeover. Having quit the military, the prince channeled his nationalistic and anti-communist fervor into politics. First, he joined the MSI, the Italian Social Movement, a right-wing party considered to be the heir of the Fascist Party. Borghese became the honorary president of the MSI, but his rabid rhetoric and his desire for action, it clashed with the party leadership. Basically, the leadership didn't want this because they wanted to improve their image with the general public. Therefore, the prince decided to found his own extremist far-right movement called the National Front. During this period, Borghese became a sort of spiritual leader for young neo-fascists, especially one Stefano della Chiaia. This guy, he was from the National Vanguard faction, a terrorist group that espoused an ideology of violent action to counter communism and the perceived influence of the Soviet Union in Italy's internal affairs. So we actually had the opportunity to speak with a retired government official who met Prince Borghese in private several times in the 1960s for this video, and he said, militarily speaking, he certainly did accomplish a lot until 1941, but I always found it curious that he finished the war with a rank equivalent to colonel, relatively low for a 39-year-old in a period of high mortality rate amongst officers. After the war, I had the dubious fortune of meeting the prince in private, as I was friends with one of his sons and my father was active in the MSI. Borghese had a gift for inflammatory rhetoric, but deep down you could tell that the man was full of himself. During the 1960s, Italy was gripped in the so-called Years of Lead, a period of tension in which left and right-wing terrorist groups alike carried out attacks against the state and civilian victims. Borghese, he was not going to stand back and watch. He was going to seize power. The first official record of preparations for a coup d'etat can be traced back to the 11th of May 1969. According to an inquiry from RAI, Italian Public TV, on that day in Geneva, Borghese had a secret meeting with a group of influential captains of industry to secure funds for his anti-communist and anti-democratic coup. Among them, even one Mr. Piaggio. Yep, the same guy who brought you the Vespa. Next step was to ask them, do you want to prevent a foreign power, as the Soviet Union, from messing with your country? Well then, we should get help from another foreign power. That would be the US of A. So Borghese dispatched his associate, Adriano Mounti, an army doctor, to meet another unsavory character in Madrid, Otto Skorzeny. This former Nazi and SS commando was famous for rescuing Mussolini from captivity in 1943 in a raid conducted by glider. This gentleman had escaped Nuremberg after the war and was thriving in Francoist Spain. He also enjoyed a good relationship with the CIA. During their meeting, Skorzeny reassured Monti that the US would be supportive of the coup as it was part of their Cold War strategy to establish a belt of reliable authoritarian governments in southern Europe to prevent the Warsaw Pact from gaining access to the Mediterranean. Think about it. By the late 1960s, Portugal, Spain, and Greece were under military dictatorships. Italy was sort of the last piece of the puzzle. Plans for the coup were ready. Borghese and his co-conspirators had managed to draft in General Micheli, head of the military secret services. And on the other end of the spectrum, there were some mafiosi whose job it was to assassinate the chief of police. Finally, the prince pre-recorded a radio address to the nation which read, "The long-awaited coup has taken place. The armed forces, the police, all the most competent men in this country are all on our side. Our most dangerous foes, those who want to enslave Italy to foreign powers, have been made harmless. Long live Italy." The action, codenamed Operation Tora Tora, took place on the 7th and 8th of December 1970 in the shape of a multi-pronged attack to the main institutions. On the 7th, a detachment of 50 National Vanguard thugs headed by Dele Chikage snuck undetected into the Ministry of the Interior in Rome and stole a cache of 200 submachine guns. The same night, an armoured battalion under the orders of Colonel Piazzi occupied strategically important barracks in Sestro, northern Italy, also a famous communist stronghold. In the early hours of the 8th, Colonel Berti led a motorized column to seize the main offices of public TV and radio in Rome. But his men were not soldiers, they were forest guards. Park rangers, in other words. Why? Well, kind of beats me, but I mean, at least they were armed. All seemed to be set for Borghese to turn Italy into another military dictatorship. But then everything collapsed. It just melted away. First, Colonel Berti met two shadowy figures in front of the TV offices. According to a witness, the two men, who appeared to be members of the military intelligence, told him to go home, boss's orders. Then the National Vanguard thugs, who apparently had received the same orders, snuck back into the ministry and returned the submachine guns. However, they only returned 199, keeping one as a souvenir. Finally, Colonel Piazzi retreated too. Turns out, at the last minute, the Black Prince had given the order to abort the coup. But why? Well, according to one of the prosecutors who investigated the coup in the following years, Claudio Vitellone, this was the intention from the start. The coup was just a bluff intended to provoke a tough reaction from the government in the hope that it declared martial law to crack down on the conspirators, effectively becoming an authoritarian regime in the process. The truth has never been established in a definitive way, some even claiming that the coup never actually took place. The investigations proved inconclusive, resulting in the prosecution of some National Vanguard terrorists, but most were acquitted, including the Vespa guy and those other industrialists. Whatever it was that happened that night, luckily it didn't work, and Italy remained a democracy. But let's get back to the night of December the 8th. In his headquarters, after giving the order to retreat, Borghese stretched his right hand to his accomplices. Branding himself a traitor, he demanded for a pistol to shoot himself. But he did not receive one, and Borghese lived on. The most incredible thing about this coup is that apparently nobody had noticed that it had even taken place. It took an article published in March of 1971 for the public opinion to finally realize that Italy was heading towards banana republic status. When the news broke, the Black Prince left for a self-imposed exile. He moved to Spain, as many other former Nazis and fascist officials had done before him. After a spell in Barcelona, he moved to southern Spain. On the 26th of August 1974, the Black Prince, Junio Valerio Borghese, who had escaped the clutches of the British Navy first and the Italian police later, could not fool an acute bout of pancreatitis. He died at the age of 68, leaving behind a trail of mysteries. Last but not least, his own death. As early as 1975, a magazine article suggested that he may have died from arsenic poisoning. The alleged killer, Borghese's own spiritual heir, Stefano Delle Chiaghi, but, well, that's another story for another day. Do leave your comments below and let us know what you think about today's protagonist. War hero, war criminal, deluded schemer? Feel free to share, like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And as usual, thank you for watching.